How many of you heard the saying that everything communicates?
He said.
Have I said it? Okay. Okay. All right. So, but that's true. Everything does communicate. We communicate even when we don't want to communicate. Okay. That's what's called the nonverbal communication that we do. And so we're going to talk about communication in the business side from verbal, nonverbal, and written communication. Okay. Why is it important to communicate effectively in business? I'm sorry? You get stuff done. Okay? You don't waste time, and in business, time is money. What else? You what? Okay, so you want to make sure that you don't get the short end of the stick. Absolutely.
You build trust and rapport when you communicate.
So you can build trust and you build those professional relationships. Absolutely. Okay? So communication is how we send messages. Okay? So we have two parties usually in a situation when we're communicating. We have a sender and we have a receiver. Okay? So the sender has to what we call encode. So I have to basically, oh, I'm messing that up. They have to encode a message. They basically have to kind of form their message that they want to send. They send it to the receiver. What does the receiver have to do? They have to decode it. So they have to basically interpret, what does this message mean? And then they have to encode their response and send their response back to the sender. It's back and forth, back and forth. That's basic communication. Okay? It happens in a split second sometimes. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to process the information that's coming through. And so it's really important that you're communicating effectively so everyone involved knows what's going on. Okay? We have formal communication. An example of formal communication is when your boss is talking to you. Okay? That is someone that's higher on the organization chart, and they're talking. Maybe they're not talking down to you, but they are talking. That's vertical communication. Horizontal communication is when you're talking to somebody at the same level as you. So what's an example of horizontal communication in the workplace? So a coworker. So if I'm a line cook and I'm talking to the salad prep guy, then we're having horizontal communication. If I'm a server and I need to go talk to the bartender, that's all front of the house. That's a horizontal communication. So again, vertical, I think of vertical with a V, goes up and down. And so that's something that we do in a vertical way on this organizational chart. Horizontal has an H, starts with an H, and has this line that goes through it. That's how I always remember the horizontal. Goes side to side. Vertical goes up and down. Okay? If I have an issue, if I'm a chef in a food production, do I just automatically go to the general manager? No. There's a chain of command. I need to go to my immediate supervisor. Now, if the person that I have a concern with is my food and beverage director, then I need to go to the next person higher than them. But I don't just automatically take it to the very top level and escalate it. That's what we call escalating. And sometimes when you escalate it, things get out of control real quick. They can. Yes, sir.
You have to be careful too. Some bosses, they like to tell you, I'm personal, I have an open door policy. Don't ever take them up on that.
Okay.
You know, and because if you go there and that's the first time they're hearing about the issue, who's that general manager going to go to? They're going to go to your immediate supervisor, and that immediate supervisor is blindsided.
Right.
You know, you're going to be talking to them. So be real careful. I'm not going to say don't ever accept the open door policy, but be smart about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Department managers, and then we do have human managers, which you're able to have the open door policy with the human managers, and then the leads and everybody else is when you go to becoming small.
Okay.
And if you have a big thing, you go
right. So understanding who you need to go to, that's that formal line of communication. Absolutely. Okay. Gossip is informal communication. Okay. Gossip is not appropriate for the workplace. Let me tell you a quick story about gossip. Okay, it's actually kind of funny. So I used to work at Cheesecake Factory, and all the servers would hang out at the bakery counter waiting for their cheesecakes, and that's where all the gossip got started, right? They're waiting for their cheesecake, and they start talking about all that stuff, right? And so my friend Beatrice and I, she and I were the bakers together, and we just like to have a good time. We were just like really fun and laughing most of the time, joking. And so one time we decided that we wanted to see how long it would take a rumor to get spread around Cheesecake Factory. And so we're baking the cheesecakes, and we're not like, we're not saying anything like deliberate about it. We're just kind of casual conversation, and we're like, so do you think we should keep it? Like, I don't know what, like, I don't know, like, we're kids. Like, I don't know, like, we're really young. We're having all this conversation, right? 30 minutes later, the assistant general manager of the store came to talk to us about inter-work relationships. And it's like, hello. I was like, there's nothing going on between me and Beatrice. It was just a joke. But 30 minutes it took for my manager, the assistant manager, to hear about it. I mean, that's how fast gossip can spread, especially if it's juicy, right? And so we definitely don't want to spread it. We always have that saying, if you don't think nice to say, don't say it at all. Good. You guys are just like my other class. I always finish it with it, come sit next to me, right? So I have some friends who are like, if you have nothing nice to say, come sit next to me. I want to hear it. But you all are all ethical and you don't want to say it at all. Good. So we want to make sure that we are, that we're not perpetuating that, okay? Barriers to effective communication, and I call those noise. So noise is not always something that causes a sound, okay? Although noise does cause a sound and it does distract from effective communication. But what are some examples? I want you to write down, like, let's say 2 to 3 things that cause noise for you. Okay, things that cause noise for you personally. Write those down. And then share your list with your next door neighbor and see if you guys share any of the same common things that cause noise. That keep you from focusing, that keep you from paying attention, that will keep you from being open to receiving a message effectively. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about that.
You talking as far as the work environment, or?
It can be work or personal. We're talking about just communication in general. So any noise that's going to affect or that's going to impact effective communication. We're going to put let's put noise in quotations. All right, share with your neighbor, see if anything comes up, anything is similar.
For me, it would be like if you're at a bar or club for music, that's what I would consider. Because you try to communicate, you talk to someone, there's that.
Or I feel like sometimes if I'm talking to someone and like 2 other people are like getting into it, like I'll focus on that instead of what I'm feeling. You know what I mean? Not because I'm nosy, but it's like if something's gonna happen or like someone's gonna fight around.
All right. So who has an example of noise they want to share? Anybody have an example of noise? Yes, ma'am.
If there's too many like papers out on the desk, I can't.
Okay. So a lot of papers out on the desk. That's maybe, well, yeah, because it's something that's going to keep you from,
That's a distraction.
noise is a distraction. Yeah, basically,
That's a sound.
noise is anything that can be a distraction to effective communication. So if you're focused on that, then all of a sudden, you're not listening to what needs to be happening. Okay? So what else, Greg?
The worst nowadays is cell phones.
Okay,
It's like
good.
Cell phone culture now. As soon as the cell phone comes out, with me, the conversation's over.
That's true.
Absolutely. Cell phones, even computers. So I've been in classes before where my neighbor next to me is on Facebook And I'm all of a sudden distracted by that, and I'm no longer listening to what the professor is talking about. So that's noise that has taken my attention away from that effective communication. No longer can I be a receiver of that information. Okay? What else? And it can be something that actually is noise. That's okay. Yes.
I went a little deeper and said like hurt. If you're hurt.
Okay, so your emotions.
Yeah, your emotions. You assume things, and then you are no longer being a good decoder.
Your emo, yes.
Yeah, and then also like I used to have real bad social anxiety.
Okay.
I overcome that, but that used to be a major interrupter. I couldn't really. I was just thinking, oh, they're judging me this way or judging me that way the entire time, and it makes you a terrible.
Okay,
person.
so nerves and anxiety.
Mhm.
Yes, sir, in the back. Good. A lack of sleep can definitely be considered noise. Anybody else have one that actually creates noise? Anybody? Yes?
When you have a co-worker that they don't see hygiene as a
Oh.
As a necessity? Yeah.
So you pretty much like you have an explanation.
That can cause a distraction, and you're focused on that, and you're not focused on what you need to be listening to. Absolutely. Good. Yes, ma'am.
I know when like I'm writing and somebody's talking, I can't focus on what I'm supposed to be writing, so I then like write what they said.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Absolutely. So some people, when they're studying, they like it completely silent. Other people like to have headphones in to listen. Other people like to have Netflix or something going on in the background while they're studying, like whether they're writing or whatever. So some people need that. I remember when I first started college, I was really set on my gym schedule, and I didn't want to sacrifice my gym schedule. So I literally would take my textbooks and put it on the treadmill, and I would read as I was walking. And I would read my textbook, and I would read it. And sometimes I also had to learn that I had to read out loud so I could hear myself say the words. So then, of course, that didn't work so well on the treadmill. I couldn't just sit there and teach the person next to me about philosophy. They weren't having it. But I had to develop these different study tools, these different study styles. Now I know that the biggest noise for me is my bed. If I go home, I will lay down in bed and I will go to sleep. I will not do any studying, right? And so today I forgot my wallet earlier, and I thought, you know what? If I don't go home right now on my break to get my wallet, if I go home to get my wallet after this class is done, I'm going to stay home. Mm-hmm. So now I need to go. So I made myself go get it, drop off the thank you card from my other class, and try to be productive during that break, knowing that now I need to go somewhere else and study. I cannot go home. So the noise, understanding that noise and those distractions help you with your time management, but also help you with your communication as well. So different types of communication: verbal, nonverbal, and written. How are we doing on 30 minutes? Okay. Verbal communication is just speaking. It's just using your words. Okay. It also is the tone of your voice. It also pertains to the tempo that you're using. It also pertains to the volume of your voice. So if I'm a chef in a crowded kitchen, pots and pans are banging, and I yell at someone across the way, does that mean that I'm mad at that person? No. It just may mean that I have to yell and raise my voice to get over all the commotion, all the noise, because that person's doing something that might potentially hurt them or the people around them. And so just because we have a loud voice does not necessarily mean that we are upset or angry. It could, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are. And so we have to then encode that message. Okay. I remember one time I came back after a golf tournament for the Hotel Association, and I wanted to say something to Chef Chris. She was in the lab, in the main lab over there. They were preparing for dinner, and I just walked in, and I was at a golf tournament. So I was in shorts and my golf shoes and a polo shirt, and I took like 3 steps in, and Chef Will he was up in the front by the hot service line, and he just, get out of my kitchen. He wasn't upset. He just was telling me from across the room that I was not appropriately dressed to be in the lab, first of all. And then also he would want me to get out before I'm wearing shorts. I could get burned, right? I've got burned many times up in Maine, and the reason is because I was wearing shorts instead of wearing pants in the kitchen. So there's a reason why we wear pants, to keep ourselves protected. Listening. We have 3 different types of listening: active, passive, and non-listening. Okay, so active listening means your focus is on that person. You're making eye contact. You've removed all distractions. You are listening to what that person is saying so that you can then formulate your response to send back to that person. Okay? Passive listening is only listening on selective parts of the message. You only want to hear what you say because you're already focused on what you're going to say in return. Okay? Usually emotions have something to say, have some part to play in passive listening. How many of you ever had this situation where you go have a conversation with somebody and you say, okay, I'm going to say this, and then she's going to say this, and then I'm going to say this in return, and then she's going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and you've planned out that whole hour-long conversation. That's non-listening. When you go in to have that conversation, it does not matter what that person says. You've already made up your mind about what you are going to say and how they're going to respond. And so we want to, it's difficult to remove emotions from the situation a lot of times. Some people say count to 10. Well, if you need to count to 30, then count to 30. Whatever you've got to do, whatever number you got to get yourself kind of calmed down. When I had difficult situations, I was at TGI Fridays, oftentimes I would go right into the walk-in, and I would just go stand there for about 15, 20 seconds, take some deep breaths, kind of cool off a little bit, and that would help me get to the point where I could then go back and get closer to active listening and not so much on that non-listening mode. How many of you ever experienced non-listening from somebody that you're talking to? Have you ever been in a situation where no matter what you say, it's not going to make any difference to what they said? Yeah, right? They are not listening. I had an instance recently. I had to talk in a board meeting. I had to bring up a very sensitive topic of the pay of the manager of the association. And this woman across the way, she was shaking her head. She was crossing her arms. And I started the conversation with, this needs to be an open discussion. This is a sensitive topic that we all need to be willing to listen and open discussion. And so it's like, I want to know what we're paying for. And right now I don't see what we're paying for. And so can someone help me understand what we're paying for? And then she kept shaking her head, and I said, okay, I probably should not have done this, but I get real emotional real quick. I get real annoyed real quick when it happens. And I said, you know what, your nonverbal skills or your nonverbal communication is telling me that you're not even open to having this conversation. And so we're in a room with, there's someone from the Texas Hotel Association. There's high school teachers from across the state of Texas. There's people from Whataburger, corporate level Whataburger. There's like some big people in this room. And she said, she starts yelling at me, and she said, you're lecturing me about my nonverbal communication, and we're talking about somebody's pay? And I said, absolutely. Like, you're not even open to this conversation. I probably should not have called her out in the open like that. But after that, everyone kind of relaxed a little bit and understood that I'm not here to take money away from somebody. I want to understand what we're spending money on. We are a board of directors. That's our responsibility. It was very difficult to have that conversation, but having open communication and removing those emotions is what was able to make that conversation move forward. And so sometimes we have to have those difficult conversations. And it is awful. You kind of get this pit in your stomach, and you're like, I really don't want to go talk to this person about this. But if you don't talk to that person about it, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, what's the worst situation? It keeps escalating until something major is going to happen, right? And so we want to make sure that we prevent that from happening, and effective communication is the way to do that. Nonverbal communication. So we're not using our voice, okay? Eye contact. If I stood over here in class and I looked down at my PowerPoint and I never made eye contact with anybody, how effective is that? No. It's not effective at all, okay? If I'm talking to somebody and I'm like looking up at the sky, That's not effective communication. Okay, that is a nonverbal cue to that person that I'm not even paying attention to them. Yes, sir.
You gotta be careful with that one though in the workplace, because it could be a cultural thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So
You know,
understanding.
some cultures, like, you know, females, they can't look. I had a neighbor in Baltimore who was from Sri Lanka. You know, she couldn't touch males. She couldn't make eye contact whenever I talked to her just to say hello. She would like look
Yeah.
away. She was nice to me and everything, but it's their culture. She could not make eye contact with any male.
Okay.
So be careful not to misconstrue that one there.
Absolutely.
And there's others where males won't look other males in the eyes, you know, like age differences and stuff
Right.
like that.
Absolutely. Very, very good comment. Your facial expressions. If you're always frowning, what message does that give off? Okay, you're unhappy. Okay, you might be constipated. You might have a rock in your shoe. Okay, so, but if you're thinking about, like, think about the front desk of a hotel or a server that comes to you to greet you at the table. If they're not smiling and now of course we can be, you know, too happy. There is a such thing as being too happy and too upbeat. Okay, we need to find that happy medium. But if they're not smiling, that's not a welcoming environment. And so we want to make sure, does that mean we have to smile 100% of the time, all the time? No, we don't have to. Okay, but we always want to make sure that we have a pleasant facial expression. Okay, I'm always reminded I can't remember if it was Toy Story 1 or 2 with the Barbie at the end. Have you all remember that part where the Barbie's like doing the tour? Is that number 2? Okay, so she's at the end, and then all of a sudden she's like, "Are they gone? Oh my gosh, my face hurts," because she's like so used to smiling. Sometimes we feel like that in this industry. When we're on, we have to be on. And then when we're off, sometimes we just want to go home and we don't want to be on. We just want to turn it off and just, you know, relax and chill. And so sometimes we have to, when we're on, you have to fake it till you'll make it. And you have to be on, you have to be positive because the guest, that's their experience. And that's your potential future business. And so we have to have those positive, open, welcoming, what we call soft skills or nonverbal skills. Okay. Your body positioning, if I always walk around with my arms crossed, okay, if I walk around slumped over, you want to have, you know, good posture, stand tall, be proud, especially if you're in a role or a situation where you're giving a presentation about something. You want to make sure that you have that executive presence that we talked about on the first day of class. All right, proxemics deals with space. How many of you ever heard of the concept of a personal bubble?
Yes.
Okay, how many of you have never heard the concept of a personal bubble? Okay, cool. So a personal bubble is how much space that you need around you to feel comfortable. I have a negative personal bubble space, okay? I love to give hugs when I say hello to people. I love to, sometimes if some people don't like that, so how many of you are not huggers? And it's okay if you're not. Okay, so if you're not a hugger and someone like me comes up to you and is like, "Hi, how are you doing?" and then their nonverbal skills are like this, I'm going to be like, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" And I'll just put my hand out, right? And so I have to be in tune to those nonverbal cues as well, okay? Not everybody likes to be hugged, and it's okay. I was listening to a comedian recently, Erin Jackson. She's fantastic. I have found her on, and anyways, but she is hysterical. At the end of her album, Grudgery, it's her new album. At the end of it, she had like this extra bonus track. And she talks about how hugging has become so casual, and she's not a hugger. And there's never really a good time to tell somebody that you're not a hugger, because if they've just hugged you, then you're going to make them feel bad about having just hugged you. And if you tell them beforehand, they're going to think that you're like not open and welcoming, and you're going to be like, "I don't want to be touched," right? And so there's never really a good time to talk about it. But if you are someone who is not, there's actually YouTube videos about how to avoid the incoming hug, and how to, you know, professionally kind of close that down. And so we want to do that. Silence is also really, really, really effective.
But that space one too, though, that could be cultural as well. 'Cause I've been to some countries where it's normal for them to be practically kissing you. It's like, hey.
Absolutely. And so understanding that, especially with tourism being such a global market now, you need to understand what the cultural implications are and the cultural values and the different cultural practices
Yeah,
are.
we in the States, we get that concept. Most people in the States, I think, like that space. We're the exception to the rule in a lot of places. I'd say most places we're the exception.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, eye contact, facial expressions, body positioning, space, silence. Silence is very effective.
Yeah, look at the Halloween movies. Yeah. Look at my eyes. Right? Can I check the video too? I couldn't press that.
He's
So now we know who's uncomfortable in silence. How many of you have a friend who's like, oh my gosh, silence is so uncomfortable? My dad's like that. Sometimes we get in the car and like if there's no music playing, if it's just silent, like there has to be dialogue, there has to be something, there has to be some kind of noise, right? But silence can also be very effective to get someone's attention. And so if you're in a situation where, you know, you're up here doing a presentation and somebody's not really paying attention, if you get quiet, then hopefully that person will be like, oh my gosh, something's going on, right? There's no talking. My best friend Claudia, she'll probably kill me for saying this, but she knows that I talk a lot. And so when we're having a conversation, she likes to wander and think about the conversations that are going on between other people across the restaurant. And if I stop talking, it never fails. If I stop talking, she'll be like, I'm sorry, what? Because like she'll hear that I've stopped talking and all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, he's asked me a question and I don't know what he just asked me. And so her response always is, I'm sorry, what? And so I'm just used to it. But yeah, so silence can be very effective as nonverbal. Also, silence can be very effective that somebody is getting to the point that they just need to be left alone. Okay? As much as I love to talk, most people know that if I get really quiet really quickly, that's the time for you to get away from me before I say something that I'm probably going to regret. My mom, growing up, my mom referred to me as a pressure cooker. And it was not an easy steam release. It was an explosion steam release when I was younger. My mom actually even told me one time she talked to my school counselor when I was in the second grade. And he was like, she was about, coping and anger management and stuff like that. And my counselor was like, really? Like David? Like the same David that I see every day at school? Like he needs these coping techniques? And so then about a month later or so, he calls my mom and he's like, you know that David you told me about? We met him today, and he's on his bike. He's on his way home, and so, so sometimes we need to like release that, And so sometimes I've learned, and my coping technique is I just need to stop talking before I just let it out. And so sometimes that silence can be an effective nonverbal communication that you just need to get away. And you just need to leave that person alone, okay? Of course, you then have those people who have awkward silence syndrome, and they're like, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? And you're just like, you need to go away from me, right? So we just need to deal with that, and that's effective communication. And so you can tell somebody, if I get like this is the reason why I'm getting like this. And you just need to give me my space for a little bit, and then we can come back and have a discussion. But right now, my emotions are not in a place that I can have an effective communication with you, okay?
Something I learned is having that self-awareness is important to professionalism. You're not a bad person if people piss you off, like you're not a bad person, but knowing what your triggers are and what to do. Like for you, getting into that walk-in freezer or whatever it was helped you cool down, like knowing how to go about your triggers, so
absolutely.
I felt better after like reading that, because I always thought like, I know I'd be a better person if I didn't get irritated at all or I didn't get emotional, but it's like self-awareness helps you.
Absolutely, and it helps you prevent that, because we've all probably seen somebody who is exploded or let their emotions go over themselves, and that person looks very unprofessional, right? And it may not even be the person that really caused the trigger. The other person that caused that was the trigger to that person's reaction is sitting off on the sidelines, and it's like, oh my gosh, I feel sorry for that person because that person just yelled at her or just yelled at him, when really you don't know the whole backstory. And so that person looks unprofessional, where then the other person who really was for that individual was the trigger, is the one who kind of gets away with that. And so you definitely want to control those emotions in the workplace, because you don't want to be that person that is perceived as unprofessional. Okay, so we got to do written communication and presentations in 10 minutes. Let's do it. Okay, so written communication is very formal. It needs to be free of errors. You need to use proper grammar, because that is sometimes your first impression with people's first impression of you. Okay, it also, in dialogue, we talked about verbal and nonverbal. I can pick up on nonverbal cues in a situation, but if I'm writing, I'm not there to pick up on nonverbal cues. I'm not there to pick up on the verbal cues. And so capitalization of letters, that equates to yelling in a written format, okay? So you definitely don't want to have like a whole email that is all capital letters. That's going to show that person that you are yelling and you are upset with that person. Now, even if you are, you don't want to convey that, because then as they're receiving that message, as they're encoding it, then they're going to start as they're decoding that message, now they have to start encoding their response. And if you give them this whole capital letters, things are going to escalate and get way out of proportion really quickly, okay? So sometimes you need to write your email, and you need to go home, and you need to leave it there, and then the next morning come back and reread your email, and if you still believe that, that's one thing, but if you have changed your mind, if you calm down a little bit, then you can edit that. That's the wonderful thing about emails, okay? You can actually edit your text, okay? We also want to make sure that we're going to avoid abbreviations, avoid jargon, right? So if I write an email to somebody, we definitely don't want to use emoticons or things like that, emojis. But if I go like to a luncheon and I come back and I said, I went to the AHA luncheon, I met the new DOS at the MRW, and they said they need new CRS or CRM people. My department chair is going to be like, what are you talking about? First of all, what is AHA? Well, he knows what AHA is. Okay, Alamo Area Hospitality Association.
Wouldn't that fall under know who your recipient is?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, if you're writing to someone who knows all of those,
you're going to choose your words wisely, absolutely. But if I write that to my department chair to say what I did, and he forwards it up to the president of the college to say this is the activity that my department has done, the president of the college is like, what's a DOS? It's the director of sales. What is a CRM? Customer Service Manager, right? And so I know those abbreviations. The party that you are writing to, if they don't know it, you don't want to use them. You want to spell everything out. Yes, sir.
Well, then again, also, if you're doing abbreviations like that, what you can also do is put in parentheses what it
the
actually
first
means,
time.
so you can inform them, and so they can start getting a hold of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then put it into parentheses, exactly. So that way you can educate them for the future and start getting that. Absolutely, good point. Okay. Share only with individuals who need to know. Okay, there's this wonderful thing called reply all. Okay, do not reply all unless all need to know your reply. Okay, that gets very annoying very quickly, especially in business, because we get so many email notifications that if people are replying to yes, yes, no, yes, I don't need to know that you just said yes. Okay, granted, like you all just got a real quick glimpse of what my life at my front of my computer is like. I don't need to know that you just said yes. The person that sent you the email probably does, but that's about it. So use that reply all cautiously. Okay, a business letter is formal writing. Okay, that's going to be your cover letter. We're going to talk about this more in the cover letter next week when we talk about the resume packet. Let's see. We try to build relationships as best as possible, but we need to make sure that we are also at the same time keeping a professional and personal, usually separate. Okay. But you want to make sure you're having that professional form of communication. If I'm writing something, then if it's somebody that I've known for 10 years, even though like I'm writing to a hotelier or a general manager, I might put a smiley face in there. Okay, I might do that if it's somebody that I know. If it's the very first email notification that I'm sending somebody, I'm not going to do that. Okay, that's not gonna. I'm gonna have my professional signature at the bottom, has all my contact information. All of that stuff is gonna be there when I write. Okay, handwritten. Oh, that was handwritten notes. I'm so sorry. I'm like trying to breeze through this real quick. Handwritten notes, thank you cards, go a long way. Okay, so if you ever have a situation where someone has done something for you, it is important to write a handwritten thank you card and deliver that or mail that to that person. Okay, it goes a long way. Documentation is any kind of formal, kind of written. If we have, for performance appraisals, if we have errors, like somebody is consistently late for work, we want to document that. Okay, that is part of your employment file, so that if we ever have an issue, we can go back to that file and say, this is why you're being fired, or this is why you're going to get a raise, because you've done this or you've done this. Okay. Presentations, last thing. So at some point in your career, hopefully you'll have an opportunity to give presentations. Hopefully at school you'll have an opportunity to give presentations. Okay. How many of you like giving presentations? How many of you do not like giving presentations? How many are like, I don't really have one way or the other? Okay, cool. It depends. If you know the topic, it's definitely beneficial, okay? So this is a bad example of a presentation. This is a bad example of what to include in a presentation. Keep in mind you want the statements on the slide as bullet statements. They should be used to trigger your memory about what you want to say. Remember, if you're giving a presentation, your eye contact should be on your audience, not reading directly off the screen. Okay, exactly what I just did, you don't want to do. Okay, you want to have bullet points. This is all the same information, but it's much easier to follow it. Okay. Now, the minimum font size, if you can help it at all, is 22-point font. 22-point font. If it's 12-point font or 14-point font and I print it out, I can definitely read that. But if I'm sitting in the back of the room of a major auditorium, 14-point font, I'm probably not going to be able to read. So 22-point font is the minimum that I recommend for presentations. You can't always fit that, but if you can't fit that 22-point font, then you can go and play with the contrast. So you can have a very light background like white, and then very dark text like black. Or you could do like a navy blue, a dark blue background, and have white text. And so the text pops off of that dark color. So if you can't have the larger text, you can at least play with the contrasting of the background and the text color. Okay, that's all called formatting. So the elements of your presentation: verbal, visual, and support content. So your verbal content is what you're saying, and that's why you have bullet statements to remind you of what you want to say and not read directly from them. Because hopefully if you're giving a presentation, you are an expert, or you've studied, or you've gained information about that presentation. Hopefully you're the one who created the presentation. How many of y'all have been in group situations where someone creates the presentation and then the group gets up here to present it? You can obviously see who created the presentation. That's the person who's reading off of note cards. The other people are reading like this. Okay? That's not effective presentation skills. Okay? Also, I encourage you to dress professionally. So even if your professor does not say to dress professionally in a presentation, I would encourage you to take that initiative and do that yourself and dress professionally. Your visual content can be anything that's up here on the screen. So your actual presentation. It can be pictures, it can be flowcharts, it can be whatever. And then the support is anything that you want to hand out and give. Okay, those are things you hand out as support items. Those are all things that can be effective to have a great presentation so that people can follow along easily. Okay, practice makes perfect. So sometimes when I was a student, I would ask my professor, hey, is there an empty classroom that I can use to practice? And I would get up here and I'd put my presentation up here and I'd talk to an empty room and I'd practice, and I would go back to the very back and I would actually look to see, can people read what my presentation says? I had a professor at A&M San Antonio that she introduced me to the use of clickers to present. And so that way, if she was wanting to, she could walk back here to the classroom and she could present from anywhere. She could advance the next slide. And she could also make sure that everybody who has computers open are actually paying attention and following along with those computers and not just being on Facebook and social media. Not that I thought you were. Just okay. Slang. Again, slang and abbreviations are things you need to avoid, or be aware of who your audience is. Okay, be aware of who your audience is so that they know what's going on. And then names that can be considered sexist and offensive. So, last thing, real quick. I did not grow up saying yes sir, yes ma'am. My dad was Air Force, but we were not raised that way. It wasn't until my early 20s that I got a job teaching 5th grade outdoor education in Houston ISD. And I lived out in Trinity, Texas, out in the middle of the piney woods of East Texas. And that's very formal, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir kind of communication. And I remember one day I walked in and the kitchen lady, she was like, she said something about, she called me baby or something. And I was just like, who's this girl? And Miss Jackie was my favorite person by the time I left teaching there. And same thing too, my boss, she'd be like, oh baby, sometimes you just gotta let things go. So, but in the other situation, if I was in a hotel and I was talking to a female or a male coworker and I was like, oh baby, sometimes you just gotta let it go. That could be considered sexist or offensive. So you want to keep in mind that how that message is being sent, you're not maybe thinking about it in any way. That's just how you talk. Darling is another way. Another thing that some people say, one of my best friends, he was like, how are you doing, darling? Like he said that to all like the servers and things like that we go out to. And so, but that's just his personality. But in business, you have to be aware of how that can be perceived. Okay? Questions, comments, concerned? All right, we covered 2 chapters. Y'all did better. The other class only covered 1 chapter. I should have hit pause before I said that.